This program is brought to you by SMC Infrastructure, building a better world.
Alma Angeles, we're moving to the next stage of the pandemic. And as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. On tonight's headlines. President Donald Trump checks out of the hospital after 4 days of emergency treatment for COVID-19, pulling off his mask the moment he reached the White House and vowing to quickly get back on the campaign trail. The WHO estimates that 10% of the world has been infected by the new coronavirus, way more than has been recorded. Philippine Airlines will cut around a third of its workforce by the end of this year as part of an overhaul triggered by the crippling coronavirus travel restrictions. And Roger Penrose of Britain, Reinhard Genzel of Germany, and Andrea Ghez of the U.S. won the Nobel Physics Prize for their research into black holes. President Donald Trump checked out of hospital after 4 days of emergency treatment for COVID-19, pulling off his mask the moment he reached the White House, and he vowed to quickly get back on the campaign trail. Take a look.
Come back there. Yeah.
Now, the 74-year-old Republican's display of bravado came the same day that his own chief spokeswoman tested positive, the latest in a viral outbreak raging within the White House. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany took off her mask and briefed reporters with her face uncovered on Sunday, the day before she announced that she tested positive for COVID-19. McEnany, who gives daily television interviews and holds frequent briefings, has tweeted that no journalists were believed to have come into close contact with her. Other positive cases close to Trump now include his wife Melania, aide Hope Hicks, campaign manager Bill Stapien, two of McEnany's assistants, according to U.S. media, and more than half a dozen others from the president's circle.
He's tested regularly, and the first positive test he received was
Now, earlier in a briefing from the hospital, presidential physician Sean Conley said President Trump is in good shape again following an aggressive cocktail of therapeutic drugs. But he also said President Trump would not be entirely out of the woods for another week.
Is that there is no evidence of live virus still present that he could possibly transmit to others. And that, routinely we talk about a 10-day window, CDC guidelines, but we're checking him more routinely than just waiting 10 days. There's a possibility it's earlier than that. There's a chance that it's a little bit later, but we will know as soon as possible. Something to do. Yesterday we talked about that, the several little temporary drops in his oxygen, and we had discussed that as a team and elected to start it early in case that persisted or worsened. The potential risks and side effects we all discussed. We looked at the data and decided that we'd rather, push ahead on it than hold and risk, the opposite. We all remain cautiously optimistic and on guard because we're in a bit of uncharted territory when it comes to a patient that received the therapies he has so early in the course. So we're looking to this weekend. If we can get through to Monday with him remaining the same or improving, better yet, then we will all take that final deep sigh of relief.
I just left Walter Reed Medical Center, and it's really something very special. The doctors, the nurses, the first responders, and I learned so much about coronavirus. And one thing that's for certain, don't let it dominate you. Don't be afraid of it. You're going to beat it. We have the best medical equipment. We have the best medicines.
Now, U.S. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden campaigned in Miami's Little Haiti and Little Havana neighborhoods in the key swing state of Florida, less than 1 month ahead of the U.S. presidential election. And there, he criticized President Trump for downplaying the importance of masks. Take a look.
Let me also say at the top, my prayers continue to be with the President and the First Lady for their health and safety, as they, like so many American families, are dealing with COVID-19. I was glad to see the President speaking and recording videos over the weekend. Now that he's busy tweeting campaign messages, I would ask him to do this. Listen to the scientists. Support masks. Support a mask mandates nationwide. Require masks in every federal building and facility and interstate travel. Urge every governor and mayor to do the same. We know it saves lives.
Don't let it dominate. Don't let it take over your lives. Don't let that happen. We have the greatest country in the world. We're going back to work. We're going to be out front. As your leader, I had to do that. I knew there's danger to it, but I had to do it. I stood out front. I led. Nobody that's a leader would not do what I did.
Now, despite President Trump's characteristic claim that COVID-19 should not be of major concern, polls show it is a huge worry for Americans. His widely panned handling of the crisis this year is also reckoned to be the main reason Joe Biden, 77, is surging in polls ahead of the November 3 election day. The United States has the biggest reported toll of any country in the global pandemic. Now, for her part, First Lady Melania Trump tweeted, "My family is grateful for all of the prayers support. I am feeling good. Will continue to rest at home. Thank you to the medical staff, caretakers everywhere. My continued prayers for those who are ill or have a family member impacted by the virus." Meanwhile, Vice President Mike Pence has tested negative again and went to Salt Lake City, Utah, ahead of the vice presidential debate. A campaign aide said plexiglass will separate U.S. Vice President Mike Pence and Senator Kamala Harris at Wednesday's debate. Political First reported the barrier news. Also, they wrote that the commission changed the layout so that the candidates will be seated 13 feet or 4 meters apart instead of 7 feet. Pence and Harris have each tested negative for COVID-19 since the Trump-Biden debate last Tuesday in Cleveland. Now, earlier, Joe Biden dropped his attacks against President Trump in light of his illness. Again, let's listen in.
I'm reluctant to comment on anything the president's health, what he's doing and not doing. I'll leave that to the docs to talk about, but I'm not going to comment on any of his conduct or his health. I don't know enough to know.
Is he feeling better by the 5th?
No, look, if the doctors listen to the science, if the scientists say that, I'm sorry, if the scientists say that it's safe, the distances are safe, then I think that's fine. I'll do whatever the experts say is the appropriate thing to do.
Now, here in the Philippines, Boracay is currently virus-free, and local officials are going to make sure it is going to stay that way in order to revive tourism in the world-famous tourism destination, according to presidential spokesperson Harry Roque. In a press briefing from Boracay, the presidential spokesperson encouraged local tourists to visit the island, adding that the long lockdown has allowed time to put in place stricter health and safety protocols. Take a look.
Bukas na po ang Boracay para sa mga turista, pati pong mga taga Metro Manila na nasa ilalim ng GCQ ay po pwede na pong bumisita sa isla na naturingang pinakamagandang beach sa buong daigdig. Kinakailangan lang po magrehistro sa webpage ng Aklan sa aklan.government@ph at i-download po ang Health Declaration Form. Matapos po, ibabalik po natin ang Health Declaration Form, isusumiti natin, kasama po ang ating PCR test na ikinuha 48 hours bago po dumating dito sa Boracay. Matapos po yung isumite online, makakakuha po kayo ng QR code. At matapos po niyan, ay po pwede nang pumunta sa Boracay. Meron na pong mga flights, ang lahat ng mga eroplano, ang Philippine Airlines, ang Cebu Pacific, at ang AirAsia.
Meanwhile, Governor Florencio Miraflores in the same briefing assured tourists that medical staff are ready to attend to suspected COVID-19 cases, complete medical facilities are available, and a hotline can easily be reached. Over 50 tourists have so far visited the beach island over the weekend, but Governor Miraflores is hoping that this number would improve in the next few weeks and even months. He said several hotels and accommodations are also offering up to 75% discounts for rooms so that visitors have enough pocket money to undergo mandatory reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction or RT-PCR tests. Currently, travelers visiting Boracay will be subject to the test before travel regulation that requires a negative RT-PCR result 48 to 72 hours prior to departure. Airlines are required to land at the Godofredo R. Ramos Airport in Caticlan, Municipality of Malay, the only airport of entry in moving tourists to the island. Now, in Spain, experts are saying that restrictions are too little, too late. Beverly Madrid joins us live from our EBC Madrid Bureau, or Spain Bureau. Hello, Beverly.
Hello, Alma. Nice to be here again.
Good to see you. How have you been?
Thank
Okay,
you.
so your experts are saying that it's too late. Why?
Yes, that's true. As the city of Madrid braced Friday for the imposition of new restrictions to curb the soaring rate of infections, Spanish experts warned the measures were too little, too late, and would be very difficult to implement. The partial lockdown, which was also applied to 9 other nearby towns, has recently come into force, with people only allowed to leave the city limits for work, school, and medical or legal reasons. Madrid's regional authorities have criticized the restrictions on citizens' movements as too stringent. But for healthcare experts, they simply don't go far enough. According to Salvador Pero of Fisavio, a healthcare research organization in the Valencia area, for all epidemiologists, these restrictions are coming very late. They should have been put in place much earlier, by the start of September. Closing off the perimeter was a measure which was very easy to implement in certain towns, but very hard in large cities such as Madrid. He said, pointing out that hundreds of thousands of people travel every day, often on public transport to work in nearby towns. Fernando Garcia, an epidemiologist at Madrid Public Health Association, also expressed surprise that they did not include a recommendation to work from home, as during the 3-month lockdown that started in March. And he thought the restrictions on seating capacity in bars and restaurants, reduced to 50% indoors and 60% at terraces, should have been greater. Others said merely reducing mobility was not enough, given the scarcity of track and trace resources, with the Madrid authorities urgently requesting military help. Madrid is currently struggling with an infection rate of 730 cases per 100,000 people, compared with just 300 per 100,000 in the rest of Spain, which in itself is the highest in the European Union. According to the government decree published on Thursday, restrictions must be imposed on all areas that have counted more than 500 cases per 100,000 inhabitants over the previous 14 days, but experts said the rate should be lower. Ildefonso Hernandez of the Spanish Public Health Society, or CESPAS, said a threshold of 500 cases per 100,000, and in the UK, the trigger rate for restrictions was 100 cases per 100,000. Even within the rest of Spain, limitations have been put in place much earlier in regions like Asturias, Galicia, and Valencia, where they kicked in with an incidence of fewer than 100 cases per 100,000 people. The virus has now killed nearly 32,000 people in Spain and has infected around 760,000. Back to you, Alma.
Right. Oh, that's sad. But have you observed the people there? How are they complying with the new restrictions in Spain? You see not too much people on the road or on the streets? Or
there are still a lot, for example, here in Brazil, there are still a lot of people, for example, in the public places like transportation. Mm-hmm. There are still a lot of people, especially in rush hour, which is from 7 to 10 o'clock in the morning and 5 to 8 in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. There's still a lot of people, and some comply with the restrictions, such as using facial masks and social distancing. But for example, in school, I noticed that some are not, they don't really implement restrictions, for example, in the children, right? So, that's why the cases here in Spain are not still...
It's increasing.
Yes, it's still increasing.
My goodness. Okay, so I'm very interested for more updates coming out of Spain. Thank you very much, and you do take care, and take care of yourself, take care of others. Thank you, Beverly, for your updates there.
Thank you so much, Alma. Reporting from Barcelona, Spain, I'm Beverly Madrid. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Bev. To Hong Kong now, where a teacher has been struck off for allegedly promoting independence in class. A move hailed by the city's leader on Tuesday as a blow against black sheep working in the education system. The decision is the first time Hong Kong's Education Bureau has removed a teaching license because of the content of lessons, and it comes as a crackdown on democracy supporters in the city gathers pace. Here's Hong Kong's Chief Carrie Lam.
About the second issue of the action taken by the Secretary for Education, or to be more exact, by the Permanent Secretary for Education under the Education Ordinance to deregister a teacher. I can assure you that we, like many professionals in the education sector, want to promote and develop quality education in Hong Kong. Okay. But if there are very tiny fraction of teachers who are using their teaching responsibilities to convey wrong messages, to promote misunderstanding about the nation, to smear the country and the Hong Kong SAR government without a basis, then that becomes a very serious matter. So the action taken by the Secretary for Education is based on those premises. I have to emphasize again that the registering a teacher is a very serious penalty under the Education Ordinance, and it has only been used once, according to records, only been used once, and that is this time, on grounds other than criminal and sexual offenses. Okay, so this shows the severity of the case.
Now, the Education Bureau said the primary school teacher who was not named had been struck off for deliberately disseminating pro-independence messages. The Bureau didn't give details of the material or explain how the teacher had crossed the line. China's central government imposed a sweeping security law in Hong Kong in June, outlawing public calls for independence and other allegedly subversive political views. Eagle News will be right back.
Star Tollway is a 41.9-kilometer highway that stretches out from Santo Tomas, Batangas all the way to Batangas City. An important component of the company's portfolio, the NAIA Expressway project is a 5.4-kilometer elevated expressway that connects the Skyway system to NAIA airport terminals and the entertainment city. SMC Infrastructure's ventures also include other projects aside from the toll road business.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back. The World Health Organization warned European countries about pandemic fatigue, which it says threatens the continent's ability to tackle the coronavirus. WHO Europe Director Dr. Hans Klug said, although fatigue is measured in different ways and levels vary per country, it's now estimated to have reached over 60% in some cases. He said this is based on aggregated survey data from countries across the region. Citizens have made huge sacrifices over the last 8 months to try and contain the coronavirus, he said in a statement. He said, in such circumstances, it's easy and natural to feel apathetic and demotivated to experience fatigue. Klug called on European authorities to listen to the public and work with them in new and innovative ways to reinvigorate the fight against COVID-19, which is on the increase throughout Europe. Meanwhile, the WHO, or World Health Organization, estimated that 10% of the world has been infected by the new coronavirus, way more than has been recorded. To date, more than 35 million cases of COVID-19 have been registered worldwide, including some 1.04 million who have died. according to an AFP tally based on official sources. But the World Health Organization now estimates that around a tenth of the planet's 7.8 billion or so people have already been infected since the virus first surfaced in China late last year, more than 20 times the official count.
Southeast Asia continues to see a surge in cases, with Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean regions showing an increase in cases and deaths. The situation in Africa and the Western Pacific is currently rather more positive. Our current best estimates tell us that about 10% of the global population may have been infected by this virus. This varies depending on country, it varies from urban to rural, it varies between different groups. But what it does mean is that the vast majority of the world remains at risk. We know the pandemic will continue to evolve, but we also know we have the tools that work to suppress transmission and save lives right now, and they are at our disposal. The future depends on the choices we collectively make about how we use those tools, develop, scale up, and distribute others.
WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, meanwhile, told the meeting that the pandemic should serve as a wake-up call for all of us. Dr. Tedros pushed back at criticism of the UN agency's handling of the pandemic, insisting it, from the start, had worked around the clock to support countries to prepare and respond to this new virus. The WHO has met with harsh criticism for its pandemic response, in particular from the United States, which under President Trump has begun withdrawing from the organization it accuses of sounding the alarm too late. Dr. Tedros has flatly denied that, insisting that the WHO had acted swiftly as soon as it received word of the new virus, and pointing out that it had declared the highest level of alert on January 30. Now, the organization has also been criticized for slow or changing recommendations on the best measures to take in halting the spread of the virus, including on the importance of wearing face masks. Meanwhile, a new guidance published Monday on its website, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention now says the coronavirus can be spread through airborne particles that can linger in the air for minutes or even hours, even among people who are more than 6 feet apart. It also said the coronavirus can be spread through airborne particles that can linger in the air for minutes or even hours for people who are more than 6 feet apart. It also said it is much more common for the virus to spread through larger respiratory droplets that are produced when somebody coughs, sneezes, sings, talks, or breathes. Now, Paris bar owners have been left shocked, according to the president of the GNI, or the National Group of Independents, representing bars, cafes, after local authorities announced a 2-week closure of such establishments due to a spike in coronavirus cases. Take a look.
Ils sont atterrés parce que ce sont des petits entrepreneurs, ce sont des chefs d'entreprise avec 1 ou 2 salariés qui ont déjà leurs salariés bien souvent est au chômage partiel. Je peux comprendre si vous voulez, l'impact sanitaire. C'est vrai qu'aujourd'hui ça s'est beaucoup dégradé, mais est-ce que le fait de fermer les bistrots, les cafés et ces lieux de rencontre pour les jeunes étudiants qui sont à Paris aujourd'hui va changer quelque chose? Je pense qu'ils vont se retrouver dans des appartements, dans leurs appartements, parce que beaucoup sont rentrés sur Paris pour faire des études dans les universités, avec de la consommation d'alcool sans contrôle, avec pas de distanciation du tout. Donc je suis très inquiet par rapport à ça. Est-ce que ça va changer quelque chose? Je n'en suis pas sûr.
To other news now, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has ordered a nationwide drive to boost the ailing economy ahead of a key party congress in January, according to state media. Now, the decision was made during a meeting of the ruling Workers' Party and comes as the coronavirus pandemic and recent floods have added yet more pressure on the isolated country's flagging economy. Mandatory mass mobilization drives featuring extra long work hours and additional duties are commonplace in North Korea in the lead up to major events. Now, the efforts have usually been dubbed battles. The North often embraces militaristic terminology and notions of struggle. But while the official KCNA news agency described it as such in Korean, in its English version, it used the more diplomatic term campaign. Participation in the exhausting battles is rigorously monitored and used as a measure of loyalty to the regime, which past campaigns denounced by rights groups as exercises in forced labor. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo warned of Beijing's malign activity in the region as he met with key Asia-Pacific allies in Tokyo, presenting a united front on an increasingly assertive China. Now, the top U.S. diplomat is meeting his Japanese, Australian, and Indian counterparts on a trip that was scaled back following the coronavirus crisis in Washington, where President Trump and a raft of staff and advisors have contracted COVID-19. Now, stops in South Korea and Mongolia have been scrapped, but Mr. Pompeo said the gathering of the so-called Quad had taken time to put together and was expected to produce some significant announcements. As U.S. State Department officials said, his first meeting was with Australian Foreign Minister Marise Payne, in which they discussed their shared concerns regarding the People's Republic of China's malign activity in the region. Now, the talks in Tokyo come with the U.S., Australia, and India all at loggerheads with Beijing, leaving Japan in the delicate position of standing alongside its allies while attempting to preserve gradually improving ties with China. Let's listen in. Now, Mr. Pompeo is the first senior U.S. official to visit Japan since Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga took office last month, and he said he was confident Tokyo and Washington were on the same page. Beijing has made no secret of its view on the Quad grouping, with the Foreign Ministry last week urging countries to avoid closed and exclusive cliques.
Has now widely propagated throughout the international community.
The foreign ministers of Israel and the United Arab Emirates visited the Holocaust Memorial in central Berlin during their historic first meeting in the German capital on Tuesday. Take a look. Israel's Gabi Ashkenazi and his UAE counterpart Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan bumped elbows in line with measures to halt the spread of the coronavirus as they met face-to-face for the first time after their countries, once longtime foes, signed a U.S. brokered deal in mid-September to normalize relations. Accompanied by their host, German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas, the pair walked through the somber monument, a vast undulating labyrinth of more than 2,700 gray concrete blocks spread over an area equivalent to 3 football fields. It commemorates the slaughter of the 6 million Jews by Adolf Hitler's Nazi regime. The visit by Sheikh Abdullah to the Holocaust Memorial is a highly symbolic step, marking the shift in attitudes in the Arab world towards Israel and Jews. Bahrain and the UAE became the first Arab nations to establish relations with Israel since Egypt in 1979 and Jordan in 1994. For the Mideast, the deals dubbed the Abraham Accords mark a distinct shift in a decades-old status quo where Arab countries have tried to maintain unity against Israel over its treatment of the stateless Palestinians. In other news, Tropical Storm Delta strengthened into a hurricane Monday in the Caribbean and is expected to intensify as it passes over Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula and into the southern United States. Take a look. Hurricane Delta was packing maximum sustained winds of 80 miles or 130 kilometers per hour as it moved southwest of Jamaica, according to the National Hurricane Center. A hurricane watch is in effect for the northern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula, and Delta is expected to enter the Gulf of Mexico early Wednesday. The National Hurricane Center predicted the storm will reach the southern United States either Thursday night or Friday morning, without encountering any obstacles that could weaken it. Delta is the 26th named storm of an unusually active Atlantic hurricane season. In September, meteorologists were forced to break out the Greek alphabet to name Atlantic storms for only the second time ever, after the 2020 hurricane season blew through their usual list, ending on Tropical Storm Wilfred. Now, meteorologist MJ Ventris of the weather company tweeted that when Delta makes landfall, it would be the 10th tropical cyclone strike of the season. He said this would break the record for most landfalling tropical cyclones in a single season, noting the previous record was 9 storms in 1916. Eagle News will be right back.
My name is Robin, and I'm 5 years old. My mom and dad said many people are getting sick. That is why we have to stay at home. That is why I cannot go to school. I cannot play outside, and I cannot even visit my friends. We can only go outside if we visit the doctor, or if we need to buy some food. When we get home, we have to wash our hands. While I'm at home, I do my homework, clean up my toys, help cooking our food, and help my parents with their work. Please stay home so we can all play together again. Bye!
Philippine Airlines will cut around a third of its workforce by the end of this year as part of an overhaul triggered by crippling coronavirus travel restrictions. The pandemic has devastated the global aviation industry, forcing airlines to seek government bailouts, furlough workers, and slash jobs. Take a look. The collapse in travel demand and the persistent travel restrictions on most global and domestic routes have made retrenchment inevitable, according to the airline on Monday, announcing the loss of up to 35% of its more than 7,000 employees through voluntary resignations and forced layoffs. The retrenchment is part of a larger restructuring and recovery plan as the flag carrier rebuilds its network amid the global pandemic. Commercial flights were grounded for more than 2 months during the country's lockdown, which sent the economy into recession and left millions out of work. Philippine Airlines said it was operating less than 15% of its normal number of daily flights after 8 months of restrictions. PAL Holdings, the listed parent of the airline, sank deeper into the red in the first half with a net loss of 20.75 billion pesos or $428.6 million US dollars. That compared with a 2.98 billion peso net loss in the same period last year. Australia is on track to post a record budget deficit this year, according to the government. It admitted, while unveiling plans to further open the spigot on pandemic stimulus spending. Government finances are forecast to be more than $200 Australian dollars or 143 US dollars, 200 billion Australian dollars in the red, even if a COVID-19 vaccine is found, according to a budget unveiled to Parliament. The Conservative government announced it was opening the public checkbook through billions in tax cuts in a bid to support a virus-battered economy, suffering its first recession in 30 years. A series of income tax cuts will be brought forward and backdated. Businesses will get billions in new tax breaks, and the government will continue paying employers not to let staff go. Overall, gross debt will rise to over $1 trillion, or around half of the country's GDP by 2024 versus roughly a quarter in this year. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg said, quote, "This is a heavy burden but a necessary one to responsibly deal with the greatest challenge of our time," unquote. Australia has fared better than most during the pandemic, both in terms of health and economics, with community transmission at low levels and the economy contracting a relatively modest 7% in the June quarter. But another lockdown in Melbourne has raised fears that recovery may be slow and spluttering. British intelligence believes any return to a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland post-Brexit would be a recruiting tool for paramilitary groups, according to MPs on Monday. The UK Parliamentary Intelligence and Security Committee said in a new report that Northern Ireland-related terrorism remains resilient, despite the work of police and domestic spy agency MI5. Now, dissident Republicans opposed to UK control of the province continue to recruit new members, particularly among young people, and more work was required at local level as a deterrent. Some 3,500 people were killed during 3 decades of violence over British rule in Northern Ireland until the 1998 Good Friday Agreement peace deal. A key part of the accord was an open border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, removing the checkpoints and army watchtowers that were frequent targets during the Troubles. London and Brussels agreed a divorce deal in which Northern Ireland will remain subject to some EU rules on goods, yet failed to quell fears about a return to customs and security checks. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson will seek to banish the coronavirus gloom with a vision of a prosperous future fueled by floating windmills when he addresses his Conservative Party's annual conference on Tuesday. In a speech closing the 4-day digital event, he will highlight an election pledge to quadruple the power generated by offshore wind from 10 to 40 gigawatts this decade, saying it will support 60,000 new jobs. Take a look.
The COVID crisis is a catalyst for change, so we need to give people the chance to train for the new jobs that are being created every day. And there's one area where we are progressing with gale force speed, and that is the green economy. The green industrial revolution that in the next 10 years will create hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of jobs. I can today announce that the UK government has decided to become the world leader in low-cost clean power generation, cheaper than coal, cheaper than gas, and we believe that in 10 years' time, offshore wind will be powering every home in the country, with our target rising from 30 gigawatts to 40 gigawatts. We will invest £160 million in ports and factories across the country to manufacture the next generation of turbines. And we'll not only build fixed arrays in the sea, we will build windmills that float on the sea, enough to deliver 1 gigawatt of energy by 2030. That's 15 times floating windmills, 15 times as much as the rest of the world put together. As Saudi Arabia is to oil, the UK is to wind, a place of almost limitless resource, but in the case of wind, without the carbon emissions, without the damage to the environment.
Britain has suffered the worst death toll in Europe from the COVID-19 outbreak, with more than 42,000 confirmed deaths, and cases are on the rise again. But Prime Minister Johnson made his career out of looking on the bright side and will insist the crisis can be a catalyst for change, promising to build back greener. Meanwhile, ordinary South Koreans rushed to pour more than $50 billion into the initial public offering, or IPO, for the management agency of K-pop sensation BTS, according to sale organizers, after it closed on Tuesday. The trailblazing septet cemented their prominence in the world's biggest music market in August, when their all-English track Dynamite debuted at #1 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. And they're credited with generating billions for the South Korean economy, and the flotation of their label Big Hit Entertainment will make its founder a billionaire while adding millions to each BTS member's net worth. Big Hit is offering around 7.1 million shares at 135,000 won, or $115 each, valuing the agency at $4.1 billion. But the four IPO managers, including NNH Investment Securities and Mirai Asset Daewoo, said retail investors applied for around 58.4 trillion won, or $50.2 billion worth of shares on Monday and Tuesday, the 2 days the retail offer was open. With only 20% of the IPO reserved for retail investors, that portion of the sale was oversubscribed 607 times, meaning the vast majority of applicants will receive at best only a tiny fraction of their requests. The Miami Heat, fueled by a 40-point triple-double from Jimmy Butler, clawed their way back into the NBA Finals with a 115-104 victory over the Los Angeles Lakers on Sunday. The undermanned, undersized underdog Heat turned the tables on the Western Conference champions in the NBA's quarantine bubble in Orlando, cutting the deficit in the best-of-7 championship series to 2-1.
We're coming to realize that we belong here. We're a really good team, and we can win, as we've shown tonight, if we play basketball the right way, if we do what we say we're going to do. So everybody's just becoming more and more comfortable as the days go by. And we won. I could care less about, a triple-double. I mean, it's competition at its finest. I think LeBron has got the best of me way too many times. I respect the guy for it, but this is a different time now. A different group of guys that I have around me, and we're here to win. We're here to compete, but we're not going to lay down. We're going to fight back in this end, even up 2-2.
They continued to make shots, and we had some turnovers. We didn't make shots. They came down and executed after we took the lead. And Jimmy had, like I said, he had his hand on all those plays pretty much. Obviously, we got to do a better job of that. I thought Jimmy was phenomenal. He did everything that they needed for him to do tonight, and he came through big time in a big-time game. We're not concerned. We know we can play a lot better. And we have another opportunity to take a commanding lead on Tuesday. So.
Now, Butler scored 40 points, pulled down 11 rebounds, and handed out 13 assists to power a Heat team missing injured Bam Adebayo and Goran Dragic for the second straight game. The injuries to Adebayo and Dragic were a huge blow to the Eastern Conference fifth-seeded Heat's hopes of pulling off a title upset. But Miami, with Butler leading the way, declined to back down. Superstar LeBron James led the Lakers with 25 points, 10 rebounds, and 8 assists. But it was a tough night for Anthony Davis, who was in foul trouble early and finished with 15 points and just 5 rebounds in the defeat. Game 4 is on Tuesday, and Sunday's victory ensures a Game 5 and increases the chances that Adebayo and Dragic could return before the series ends. In other news, Roger Penrose of Britain, Reinhard Genzel of Germany, and Andrea Ghez of the U.S. won the Nobel Physics Prize on Tuesday for their research into black holes. The physicists were selected for their discoveries about one of the most exotic phenomena in the universe, the black hole, according to the Nobel Committee. Let's take a listen.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has today decided to award the 2020 Nobel Prize in Physics with one half to Roger Penrose for the discovery that black hole formation is a robust prediction of the general theory of relativity. And the other half jointly to Andrea Ghez and Reinhard Genzel for the discovery of a supermassive compact object at the center of our galaxy.
Penrose, 89, was honored for showing that the general theory of relativity leads to the formation of black holes, while Genzel, 68, and Ghez, 55, were jointly awarded for discovering that an invisible and extremely heavy object governs the orbits of stars at the center of our galaxy. Now, Ghez is just the fourth woman to receive the physics prize since 1901, when the first Nobel Prizes were handed out. Penrose, who is based at the University of Oxford, used mathematical modeling to prove back in 1965 that black holes can form, becoming an entity from which nothing, not even light, may escape. His calculations prove that black holes, superdense objects formed when a heavy star collapses under the weight of its own gravity, are a direct consequence of Einstein's general theory of relativity. Genzel and Ghez have led research since the early 1990s, focusing on a region called Sagittarius A at the center of the Milky Way. Using the world's largest telescopes, they discovered an extremely heavy, invisible object around 4 million times greater than the mass of our sun that pulls on surrounding stars, giving our galaxy its characteristical swirl. In April 2019, astronomers unveiled the first photo of a black hole. Now, Roger Penrose of Britain, Reinhard Genzel of Germany, and Andrea Ghez of the U.S. won the Nobel Physics Prize for their research into black holes. What are they? Take a look. Black holes have been lurking in galaxies for billions of years, the most powerful known forces in the universe. Their gravitational field is so strong that nothing, not even light, can escape from them, and they're actually packed full of space matter, so are not really holes at all. There are at least two types of black holes. Stellar mass black holes form when a huge star more than 10 times bigger than our sun burns up all its fuel, collapses in on itself. According to scientists, there could be millions in our galaxy, the Milky Way alone. They grow by gobbling up other stars or merging with other black holes to become a supermassive black hole, millions to billions of times bigger than the sun. Humans can't see black holes, but we can observe their effect on matter close by. When normal stars are sucked in, they accelerate and heat up, emitting X-rays, which are detected by orbiting space telescopes. But black holes are not purely a destructive force, and scientists say they also churn out matter, which may help generate new stars and solar systems. And before we close, we'll leave you with a word of hope. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. See you again tomorrow evening. Good night. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.
This program was brought to you by SMC Infrastructure, building a better world.